Cloud. I now recognize Congresswoman Presley for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your continued commitment to this issue. It is critical that we hold both big tobacco and big vaping accountable for targeting young people and for knowingly hooking generations of Black and brown Americans to nicotine. Our work to end the smoking epidemic is not just simply a matter of public health. This is and always has also been an issue of racial justice. Last week, my home state of Massachusetts became the first in the nation to place a permanent ban on flavored e-cigarette and menthol cigarette products. This is important because if we are banning flavors, we must ban all flavors, which includes mint and menthol. To not do so would be discriminatory, since menthol in particular has imposed a unique and deadly burden on the Black community. We must clamp down on the production of menthol products and not the individual possession of it, because there are real intergenerational traumatic consequences of broken windows policing that has historically over-criminalized Black and brown communities. Something I called for in my People's Justice Guarantee resolution. We must be simultaneously attuned to both public health and public safety to ensure that there are no more Eric Garners. For years, big tobacco companies disproportionately targeted more tobacco ads, and specifically more menthol tobacco ads, in Black neighborhoods. In some instances, as many as 10 times more ads for menthol products. The CDC reports that nearly 9 out of 10 Black smokers prefer menthol cigarettes. So I think it's safe to say, Mr. Zeller, that the targeting was effective, correct?
I would agree with that.
So today, nearly 45% of Black menthol smokers say they would quit smoking if menthol cigarettes were banned. And almost 2/3 of Black smokers under 24 years of age would do the same. A year ago, the FDA announced plans to ban menthol cigarettes, saying that a ban was necessary because menthol products, quote, unquote, disproportionately and adversely affect underserved communities. So a year has passed, and the FDA has not followed through on this ban. Why is that, Mr. Zeller?
As you said, Congresswoman, we went through an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on a variety of issues related to flavors, including the presence of menthol in cigarettes. And I would add to what you said that one of the public health concerns about mentholated cigarettes is not just the disproportionate use of menthol cigarettes by African Americans, but the role that menthol cigarettes plays in attracting kids of any color to experimenting with cigarettes. And we continue to review the comments and explore what the regulatory options and policies should be, but I absolutely hear you, and as Center Director share your concern from a public health perspective.
I'm sorry, so just to reclaim my time for a moment, just in the interest of time, just to be clear on the record, does the FDA plan to follow through with this ban? Yes or no?
I cannot give you a yes or no answer in an open public hearing. All I can tell you is that we're continuing to review all of the evidence related to flavors in all tobacco products as we try to follow the regulatory science and come up with the right policy.
So previous attempts to ban menthol have been overridden by the Office of Management and Budget. Why is that?
You need to be more specific. I don't know what you're referring to.
Do you want me to restate the question?
I don't understand what specific instance you're referring to.
Okay, I'll move on. I think the point that I'm really just reiterating, and I can't underscore enough because we're talking about a life and death matter, is that 47,000 Black people die every year from smoking-related illness, making this the largest cause of preventable death among Black Americans, even more than gun violence or car accidents. So we don't have more time. People are dying. So in my final second, I just want to go to a different line for a moment. So e-cigarettes are not, are e-cigarettes recognized as an effective smoking cessation aid or not?
They are not approved by FDA as a cessation aid.
Okay. So e-cigarettes are not an effective cessation device. Menthol e-cigarettes are not an off-ramp for adult menthol smokers. They are an on-ramp to hooking a new generation of smokers.
Well, if we can go past the 20 seconds that you have left, there's a public health balancing act that the agency has to do with whatever policy emerges on flavors. And it's balancing, well, what Are flavors helping adults successfully transition off of cigarettes completely to e-cigarettes? What role are flavors playing in that? And it's part of the balancing that we need to do. It's an easy call on the negative side of the ledger when it comes to the role that flavors are playing in attracting kids to experiment, especially kids who are walking around thinking that these are harmless products. But it's a balancing act because we have heard repeatedly from former smokers that it was the presence of certain flavors that helped them successfully transition completely away from cigarettes.
Thank you. I now recognize Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When Dr. Ann Schuchat of the CDC testified before the subcommittee on September 24th, I asked her about whether non-smokers are being drawn to e-cigarettes by their flavors, and she said that among our young people, quote, flavors are pretty much always what brings youth into starting use of e-cigarettes. She also testified that for a flavor ban to be effective at keeping kids off cigarettes, all flavors, including menthol, must be included. Mr. Zeller, do you agree with Dr. Schuchat's assessment that in order to be effective, a flavor ban must include menthol?
Again, I think much to the consternation of this subcommittee, I can't get into the specifics of the policy that's under consideration. All I can tell you
I wasn't asking about the specifics of the policy under consideration. I'm asking your opinion, if you agree with Dr. Schuchat's assessment that in order to be effective, a flavor ban must include menthol. You're not prohibited in any way, shape, or form from offering your opinion.
As I said in an earlier response, one of the things that we're trying to account for is the data that came out in the Monitoring the Future survey that only came out recently. And I'll just repeat it very, very briefly.
Please briefly, because I am familiar, I was here when you said it, and I don't need it repeated.
Okay, then I won't repeat it, and I'll just cut to the chase and say, we now have data that shows that for kids who use Juul, they're far more likely to use mint than menthol, far more likely. And how do we account for that as we're trying to make the right policy here to do the best job of protecting kids?
So reclaiming my time, did the idea of exempting menthol from a potential ban on e-cigarette flavors originate from the FDA? That's an awfully long pause.
The issue of what the scope of the policy should be, what it should include, was the subject and remains the subject of ongoing discussions.
Did the idea of exempting menthol from a potential ban on e-cigarette flavors originate from the FDA, or did it come from somewhere else?
FDA put the science forward that I just described to you.
That's not what I'm asking you. The idea to exempt menthol, was it an idea that was generated by the FDA? Yes or no?
Let me try to answer your question in a more general and hypothetical way.
I have other questions for you, and I want an answer. It's not a trick question. Did the idea to exempt menthol from a flavor ban come from the FDA, or did it come from somewhere else?
There have been a variety of options for the scope of this policy that have been under discussion.
You're talking about options. I'm asking the idea.
Please let me finish.
I'm trying to get a yes or no question, and you are obfuscating.
The options that FDA put on the table for consideration, going to what the scope of this guidance should be, went to the issue of menthol in or menthol out. We put
But is that
options.
Did the idea
If the answer to your question is who put the options on the table, menthol in or menthol out, then the answer is yes, we put it on the table.
So it didn't come from somewhere else. It wasn't an idea brought to you from the outside. It was generated by the FDA. It was your idea with no.
At a point in time when all options were being explored.
Okay. So there was influence from the outside, and it was not. You are not answering that this was an idea that was exclusively generated by the FDA.
I don't think that's what I said.
Okay.
When we were,
I want to make sure I understand what you are saying.
when we were identifying options, we put a variety of options on the table for consideration that included menthol in or menthol out. that
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Chairman, we are really going to have to make sure that the FDA understands what they are required to answer when we ask them questions, because Mr. Zeller is not complying with what's required of him. Do you have any reason to, on November 13th, Dr. Schuchat testified that the National Youth Tobacco Survey didn't differentiate between menthol or mint, and we don't even know if kids can differentiate menthol or mint. Do you have any reason to believe that kids can differentiate between menthol and mint flavors?
I'm aware of the literature that says kids may not be able to differentiate between menthol and mint.
And menthol and mint e-cigarettes, we know, may carry additional unique harms. Pajulagone is a cancer-causing agent present in mint plant oil. Mr. Zeller, the FDA banned it as a food additive last year, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
And a recent study from Duke University School of Medicine found extremely high levels of pajulagone in both menthol and mint e-liquids. It found the level inhaled by menthol and mint e-cigarette users is as much as 1,000 times higher than menthol cigarette users. Shouldn't we be concerned about that?
We've been looking into that science. We have questions about the study that was done, but we're aware of it,
You
and we're
banned it
looking
as
at
a food additive last year, so I would think that you already have pretty good science that it's dangerous, correct?
We're looking into the methodology and the adequacy of that
That
science.
study came out on September 16th. We've heard that a decision to exempt menthol may have been made by October 31st. Were you aware of this study on October 31st when you made that decision?
I'm not going to refer to any decision, but we were aware of that study by October 31st, yes.
When you are considering pulling flavors and a revelation comes to light about dramatically high levels of a cancer-causing agent in menthol e-liquids, wouldn't that be a good reason to pull them from the market to determine if they are safe?
It would be part of the consideration that we would make about what the scope of the guidance should be.
Okay.
I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.